Hello, students. I hope you feel that you're off to a strong start with your supporting a position with sources essay. I will be looking at your source evaluations as soon as I can and getting those back to you so that you can be confident that you have good sources for this paper. Now, how we're going to start off this week is I'm going to review just a little bit where we are with the writing process and what's coming up, and then we'll really dive into how to use sources in your paper. So, just a little reflection. Last week you did the discover and the sources phase. Now you're moving into the plan, draft, and revise edit phase, which is what we'll be working on this week. At this point, I always recommend go back and reread the assignment instructions. Sometimes this is just a good check to make sure we're on the right path, to make sure we don't overlook and forget something. Sometimes once we're in the middle of a project, something stands out with the instructions that we didn't notice before. So I'd recommend doing that. There's also an additional sample student essay on MU Learn that you can look at to help you under week 4. So you may want to check that out as well. Now we have 3 learning objectives for this week. The first is to learn how sources are used to support an idea, so basically how you integrate them into your paper. And then essentially that's point 2 as well. And then the third is how to cite and punctuate those sources when you incorporate them within your text, when you're using in-text citations, and then your works cited page. Now, I do want to make a biblical connection that some of you may not necessarily be familiar with, and that is how sources are used in the Bible. So, for one example, in Luke, Jesus actually uses a source to kind of show people that the kingdom of heaven is at hand and that he's kind of the Messiah. So, there's one time where he's in the synagogue and the scroll of Isaiah is being handed out, and he reads from the prophet Isaiah where it says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that the captives will be released, and that the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come." So, right there, he's using a source to kind of support saying who he is. So, even some additional examples in Luke, when he's writing the Gospel of Luke, he even says that he gathered all these stories and miracles that Jesus did through eyewitness reports. So, right there, those are his sources, and he's stating where he got his information. Again, in Acts with Peter, he quotes the prophet Joel to explain what the gift of tongues is, what Pentecost was, and what people were seeing with the men. He says, no, they're not drunk. They're kind of speaking in a heavenly language. And then all of this kind of comes together with 1 Peter 3:15, where it says, "Regard Christ the Lord as holy in your hearts. Whenever anyone asks you to speak of your hope, be ready to defend it." So that means be ready to provide evidence, examples, or sources to explain why you have your faith, why you believe in Christ. So right there, that's a real personal connection that we can make with our faith and for why we should understand how to use sources in our arguments and in our writing. So now I'm going to have us pivot again, and I want us to think about audience. Okay. So considering your audience is very important in writing because that's who you're trying to convince, that's who you're trying to educate, that's who you really want to benefit from what it is that you have to say. So I recommend, and this is in your worksheet, as well as I'm wanting you to relay the learning objectives and some of those quotes from the Bible in the worksheet. So I would go there and kind of take a few minutes and answer these questions about your audience. Who do you think would benefit from the research that you've done? Okay. And these people are really your target audience. And then what does your audience already know about your topic? So this can help you know, what do I not need to cover in my essay and where should I focus? Also consider, what do you want your audience to learn from your research? And from your research, what evidence will be the most helpful in persuading your audience? So again, that's another way for you to target down your audience, your evidence, to know what you should include in your paper and what you shouldn't. So when you're thinking through these, you might also then realize, maybe I need to go back and tweak my thesis a little bit. And you may have discovered this too when you were doing your research at the end of last week, that in reading more, you kind of discover more of a nuance to add in, or maybe a little bit more of a narrower or targeted area you want to focus on. So right now would be a good time too in the worksheet is to go back and revise your thesis if needed. Okay, so it's perfectly okay. Remember, I've been saying this is a working thesis. You weren't committed to it yet. So I would say go ahead, revise your thesis if it needs it, but you should be getting close to the form that you're committing to at this point. Now go ahead and complete those activities in the worksheet and then jump ahead and start reading some of the chapters for this. So chapter 29 on working with sources and chapter 37 punctuation, which you will be, both of these chapters you'll need for the exercises due Thursday. So go ahead, read, and then jump to the next video where I'll start walking you through the exercises for this week.